High Mysticism by Emma Curtis Hopkins. Chapter 9, Part 2, Ministry. Haggai promised that the desire of all nations shall come. He meant that the glorious Lord ever-facing shall be acknowledged, recognized, sound, free, wherever we look. Like attracts like. Magnetic gladness of heart attracts gladness of heart. This medicine divine stays waiting high watch, self-recognition, joyous association with the Lord I am of our neighbor, fearless of his hurting power, fearless of all hurting powers, heavenly hosts for antiphons. Harvest from seed that was scattered on the borders of blue Galilee. He that overcometh will I give power over the nations. To overcome is to come over. To come over or above our circumstances and bodily feelings, by looking above to him, ever beholding hitherward, is to identify with power above the nations and combinations of delusions, as divine magnets to the strong, glad, free self, even of multitudes. Great multitudes came unto him, and he healed all. From many an ancient river, from many a palmy plain, they call us to deliver their land from error's chain. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar. Pillar is strength. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Joy gives mysterious potency to the hands visible and to the hands invisible. To stretch forth invisible hands and touch responsive strong spirit and say, come forth, is to go into all the world and lay hands on, that multitudes may come forth, repossessing their own wholeness. And they heard a great voice from heaven, saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended. And Joshua was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him. And when Paul had laid his hands upon them, the Holy Ghost came on them, and they spake with tongues and prophesied. Though the angel of man's presence has shown ages long renitency to wails of woe, it springs in full orbed splendor forth to greet the sceptered word of the joyous Shiloh spark of the new healer. Qui mutandis est. With vision cast downward, Mary was accusing some gardener of hiding her Lord. With upward vision she beheld the Lord and no guilty gardener. She brought forth the angel out of the heavenly spaces and forgot that the guilty gardener ever existed. They shall forget misery as waters that pass away. Thus with upward vision does the delusional age end, and the reality age appear. Upward vision draws up from our native root of sincerity. By upward vision off practice, every human being starts anew from his sincerity root, and drops the dry branches of lower attention, which have formulated into nervous prostration, decrepitude, poverty, discouragement, apprehension, and flourishes forth from his sincerity root of vigor everlasting, his bottomless life pit, his healing joy fountain, his winning bosom spark, gathering the angelhood of the universe to companionship. Is it not written, ruling all nations with rod of iron, or with the irresistible pulling strength of magnetic iron? I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. So with divine allurements, again at the alphabet of mysticism, we are brought to David to lift up our heart with our hands unto God in the heavens, with sweet commandment, praying, turn thou us unto thee, O Lord, renew our days as of old. This is the heavenly exhortation that makes our message as ointment poured forth. This causes the responsive nations to say with David's son, for the great ministry's sake, draw me, we will run after thee. Many waters cannot quench our love. of thy wondrous word, that Memra, which created the world, which brought Israel out of Egypt, which brought the miracles recorded in the deep book of Exodus. From the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. Is it not always understood that darkness is ignorance? The 6th hour sets forth the law of spontaneous or volitional calling after the unknown and invisible, to let it take possession of us after its own fashion. The 7th and 8th tell of foregoing ahead for our neighbor's unknown and universal best good to take possession of him, manifesting after its own fashion. But the 9th, in all ages, treats of the knowing, the cognizance, the independent awareness by our own apperception of the reality of the high best self of our neighbor, the great angel of his presence. What truth, when number 9 we see, should we remember most? The orders it should call to mind of all the heavenly host. The tangibility of the immortal and unspoilable self, clothed, housed, fed, strong, glad, free, as the outward sign of our recognition of the oneness of his Judah and Joseph self. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, ye have done it unto me. This closes the age of darkness, of the hiddenness of the self, and gives tactile value to the angel of God's presence speaking to us and dealing with us, whenever a human being speaks to us or faces us. We appreciate that as there is but one supreme self in the universe, ever inviting each to transcend itself by recognition of its own one supreme self, we are all brethren, because our neighbor's one supreme self is our supreme self also. This is the genesis of the injunction to love the neighbor as the self. It is the Brahma self, one self, thou that self, of most ancient teaching. Cornelius, a centurion in the Roman army, had lifted up his fearing vision Godward toward the angel of the high supreme was tangibly present before him, conversing with him as man to man, lovely, masterful, wise. At the 9th hour of the day it was, as we read, Acts 10th chapter. At the 9th hour Jesus gave up the ghost. He dropped the sense of a body or mind differentiated from the supreme self. He sent forth his divine influence untrammeled by form, to be contagion by all men, world without end. The Levitical law of Hebraism reads that man shall eat of the old fruits till the 9th. That is, we must stand by what we are taught as gospel truth of appearances, till we know to speak by our untaught self. Peter is trying in his 2nd epistle to tell us that we have a native word of prophecy, whereunto we do well that we take heed, unto the day dawn and the day star arise in our hearts. Day star is lodestar, magnetic center, where the original knower in us waits our spoken I am that, and our neighbor waits our spoken thou art that, and the very world waits our I decree. Look upon Zion, says Isaiah. There the glorious Lord will be unto thee, a place of broad rivers and streams, and the inhabitants shall not say, I am sick. The people that dwell therein shall be forgiven. Surely this is a precious treasure, this topaz stone of independent recognition and independent speech. What reactions of new wisdoms lie quiescent in us, till our eyes do look on Zion, and the Lord supreme be the place of our vision's glad rest. What consort with angels our neighbors shall experience by our right view of them, as Mozart experienced new music by viewing angelic choirs. Every other way of viewing our fellow men exposes us to his shadow systems, discordant traits. Jeremiah speaks of a whole nation as having eye failure because of vain watching toward a people that could not save. Balaam of Mesopotamia caught a cursing mind from associating with Balak, king of the Moabites, who was filled with the cursing mind. So Balaam was willing to curse the Israelites or any other people Balak might suggest. King Balak had a psychological influence over his associates, like many powerful people of our own time. And Midian, his envoy, who also was under his spell to defeat whomsoever might oppose him, right or wrong, added his vocal persuasions to the king's forceful psychology. And when Balaam got well into their swing, he prayed God to make him strong to sweep the Israelites off the earth. After a night's communion with the I Am on high, he opened his mouth with sublime words of blessing and foretelling for the Israelites. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall arise out of Israel. Balak and the princes of Moab with Midian angrily reminded him that he had been hired and influenced to curse and not to bless. But Balaam, still under the bright sway of high wisdom, caught by a night's communing with the transcending, could not enter again into their psychological aura, and despite their threats, being as it were in a trance, having his eyes still open, he pronounced the words of the high deliverer. How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, and thy tabernacles, O Israel. Blessed is he that blesseth thee. How shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom God hath not defied? For from the tops of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone, and shall not be reckoned among the nations. Balaam saw the life of the Jews on earth 3,000 years ahead of him, even up to this day, when the scepter of the Israelitish stock, the star of the son of Jacob in the morning magnet of the whole earth, the star that shone over the manger, now covering the earth with its light. He that overcometh and keepeth the word of my patience, I also will keep him. Come over the personal hardships by looking up. Did not the great prophet say, in the days of the world war and universal lamentation, look up. Keep the great name, or the great word, as set forth in the first study, and prove the promise, I will keep thee from the hour of temptation. A servant girl, feeling the spark burning in her breast, said, I must be a missionary. With God all things are possible, and he has called me to be a missionary. When the mission board received her application, they told her she had not the credentials for foreign missionary work. But nothing can down the flame of the I am that, when once uttered and kept as precious truth. Is it any surprise to be told that when delegates of different foreign mission stations were in the United States and heard her sing, waft, waft ye winds the story, and you, ye waters, roll, till like a sea of glory it spreads from pole to pole. And still, still with thee, when purple morning breaketh, when the bird waketh, and the shadows flee, fairer than the morning, lovelier than daylight, dawns the sweet consciousness, I am with thee. They invited her to go to foreign shores with them, telling her plainly she could win more hearts with her singing than they could win with their preaching. Keep therefore the high watch and the wonder-working name, till the spark I am that lets loose its executive splendor, with its I will and I decree. Such are the elect who seem not to compete or strive, yet with the foremost still arrive, prevailing still, spirits with whom the stars connive to do their will. Speak from the spark dominant, and see its dominion. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, as Isaiah prophesied. How reviving to mankind is the voice of the God-will, waking the silence of ages, with the sceptered word addressed to the true self of our neighbor. It is your will to be glad and strong and free. It is my will that you be strong and glad and free. It is the will of God that you be strong and glad and free. Walk with me, acknowledging no other voice than the voice of the Supreme, now courting all wills into its one will. I am that will. Thou art that will. God is that will. There is but one will. Man has become weary of his thoughts and seeks for higher power to free him from his mental prison. Look unto me. I will show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. Exaltation of the mystic visional sense wakes recognition of our own hidden God seed, and inspiration fans our God seed to full exhibition as children of the promised golden age. End of chapter 9. And in synopsis of chapter 9, Emma is making a very clear statement that we're all one. And we all came from the one Spirit. We all live in the one Spirit. And we all live and move and have our being in this one unified field. Now, we're all individuals within this one Spirit. We all have our own point of consciousness, and we all have our own individual personality. But on the subjective side of life, we're all one. And that's why it's impossible for us to curse somebody and not feel, the suffering of that. It's impossible for us to wish harm on somebody and not feel the harm of those harmful thoughts, because we're all one. So we have to wish for everybody else the same that we wish for ourselves, and not just wishing, but knowing. We have to forget the outward appearance altogether. Only speak to the God self of every person. Only acknowledge the God self of every person. If we talk to the person as their human self, then we're not doing our ministry. It's super important that we only acknowledge the God self in every person. And when we acknowledge that God self, only that God self can show itself to us. And it doesn't matter where we go. We could go to any part of the world, any country, any person we ever meet. They all have that God spark and that God self within them. And that's the only reality that we are to acknowledge, because the human condition isn't a reality anyway. It's just a temporal experience. It's fleeting, it's passing, it's delusion. The only reality is the eternal, immortal, flawless, perfect God self of every person. And anything other than that is delusion. So we have got to be very clear about that. And we are not to judge according to appearance, but we are to judge righteous judgment. And every person we interact with, we only interact with their God self, and that's the only part of them that will show itself to us. Again, it's the observer effect. Whatever I'm observing in you is going to show itself forward. So it's important that we observe the God spark in each person. And that would be the end of the synopsis of chapter 10. We only have 2 chapters left, and I'm so excited to continue our journey of high mysticism.